Black Labor, White Wealth by The Search for Power and Economic Justice by Dr. Claude Anderson. Recommendations. It is time for blacks to make acquiring repar- it's time for blacks to make acquiring reparations from the American government a major national issue. Reparation payments should be directed into black communities in the form of infrastructure improvements, business and industry development, and business and industry development loans, educational grants and stipends, and expanded public services to repair these socio-economic damages that the dominant society and government have inflicted on 16 generations of black Americans. The immigrant fee should be charged to all new immigrants and channeled into an investment fund earmarked for the economic revitalization and industrial development of black ghettos. America remains the premier destination for legal and illegal immigrants all around the world. It is clear that the government should stop the tide of immigrants seeking the benefits of first-class citizenship who have neither paid any dues nor contributed towards building the quality of life they are seeking. Immigrants should no longer be given a free lunch upon the granting of citizenship. It is criminally unfair for generation after generation of European, Asian, and Hispanic immigrants to be brought into this country and allowed to enjoy benefits historically denied to blacks. Directing immigration fees into an investment fund would not be a novel initiative. The 1990 Immigration Act allows 10,000 visas each year for foreign investors to invest between $500,000 to $3 million in an enterprise that provides employment for at least 10 full-time U.S. workers. Blacks could use the act as a model for establishing an immigrant investment fund to industrialize black communities and improve its economic conditions. With small modifications, the visas could be issued to investors who put money into black communities. Smaller immigration fees could also be established and directed toward black reparation programs. The economic justice that would be inherent in such fees would not only be the repayment to black communities for the expropriated labor, the fees would also cushion the new immigrants' drain on the social services, establish common ground between the immigrants and blacks, and repair the economic drain that these ethnic businesses cause in black communities. The investment fund strategy would also provide training and investment loans for blacks to start businesses. Furthermore, just as ethnic immigrants are using revenues generated from their black-oriented businesses in order to pay transportation costs, of their relatives and friends from their homelands to America, blacks could use investment funds to cover the cost of bringing in and hiring immigrants of African descent. In fighting, in fighting for such measures, blacks could make a national issue out of the racial injustice within American immigration policies. 3. There is no historical justification for providing affirmative action relief for groups such as Asians, Hispanics, the disabled, gays, abused wives, or senior citizens. People in these categories haven't suffered throughout American history. Blacks must refocus the national agenda on race, then extricate themselves from the catch-all category of minority. As the dominant society's public policy on blacks continues to make blacks obsolete, government will increasingly function as the drum major for benign neglect toward black Americans. Unless blacks step forward to challenge the government to amend its policies, affirmative action in name only will be used to perpetuate the sham. There will be no affirmative action efforts that solely address the historical wrongs that still hound blacks. Instead, affirmative action programs will be nothing more than empty shells for addressing the needs of ambiguous, amorphous groupings. Affirmative action provisions should be meted out on a ranking or scale that determines the most needy and the most worthy. Guarantee that no person is mistreated, and guarantee that the person who needs the most help gets the most constructive help. In addition, public policy remedies must be restructured for the narrow purpose of redress to blacks. In addition, public policy remedies must be restructured for the narrow purpose of redress to blacks. The justification for such measures is this: Hispanics, white women, and other minorities were not statutorily enslaved, Jim Crowed, or racially segregated. Redress should be directed towards specific injured groups and not to non-injured classes who now seek to benefit from the affirmative action programs that were originally designed to address the historical suffering of blacks. Qualifications for reparation type programs should include a scale to measure the degree and extent of historical oppression, as well as the magnitude of contribution the potential reparation recipients made towards the development of the nation. Applications for affirmative action or reparation benefits should also include a scale to both assess the extent to which the applicants sustain statutory abuses by the government and measure the length of the potential recipients' residence in the country. Strategy 3: wealth and group economics. Blacks are America's most impoverished population group, but when considered as a nation within a nation, they could generate disposable income to sustain black economies. Black America has approximately $280 billion annually in disposable income, but as a group, they remain impoverished because they have failed to create their own internal economy, and therefore they do not retain their capital within their communities. The or To survive in the rapidly approaching pluralistic society, blacks must create a black economy. To develop economically, black dollars must bounce or exchange hands 8 to 10 times before leaving the black community. Contained and recirculated dollars within black communities would stimulate business, create employment opportunities, and expand tax bases. Analysis. 1. Besides correcting the classic problems surrounding the insufficient number of high failure of black businesses, lack of capital, management skills, experience, two other social factors impede the establishment and effective operation of black businesses in black communities: the withholding of support by whites and blacks, and the lack of a vertical network of supportive businesses, discussed in more detail in Chapter 9. It is difficult and in many instances impossible for black businesses to survive when both whites and blacks are boycotting them. Regardless of any business know-how and capital a black business person might have, regardless of any business know-how and capital a black business person may have, without a customer base, the business cannot thrive. White society avoids doing business with blacks. However, blacks now boycott black businesses also as they pursue the integration dream. Boycotting activities intensified after the 1954 desegregation decision. Black businesses that survived boycotting have been hamstrung by the lack of supportive vertical black businesses within their communities. It is very difficult for black retail businesses to be competitive when they are wholly dependent upon non-black distributors, manufacturers, warehousers, processors, and wholesalers for their products. Surveys have shown that these upline businesses charge blacks 25 to 50% more for poor quality merchandise that is delivered on an irregular and unpredictable schedule. With overpriced, poor quality merchandise, black businesses cannot be competitive. Such conditions reconfirm black customers' inclination to look for the products from whites, believing that the white man's ice is colder. Many successful black businesses have survived by politically or economically passing in white communities. Many successful businesses have survived by politically or economically passing in white communities. They go ahead of the customer's march. They got ahead of the customer's march to the suburbs by building their businesses in the suburbs and catering to non-black customers. By locating their businesses outside of the black community, they hoped to recapture some portion of the white and black customers who routinely boycott black businesses and spend their disposable income in white communities. By appearing as non black owned companies, they became independent of black communities. These businesses are permitted to operate in white communities as long as they do so in a non-competitive or non-threatening fashion. Should it become known that they are successful and black owned, they would be in for serious problems with whites. Thus, black businesses that are totally independent upon the larger white community are guests who exist on borrowed time. 2. The doctrine of unequal exchange continues to be an effective strategy that whites use to gain access to black wealth. Black Blacks annually transfer their disposable income into white communities and receive little more than consumer satisfaction in return. Blacks currently retain about 5% of their total gross income. Of this 5%, approximately 3% is spent with non-black merchants who take it out of black communities. Only 2% remains with black merchants. It is impossible for black communities to survive off of 2% of its annual income. By spending their income with non-black businesses, blacks deprive their communities of a tax base for providing human services and jobs. In a capitalistic country, human worth is valued in terms of ownership and control of wealth, so blacks disempower themselves when they don't spend money with other blacks. 4. Employers, business owners, and investors have 5 times the net worth of employees. Blacks in general had a greater number of businesses per 1,000 persons at the turn of the century than they have today. To turn this around, blacks as a group must employ discipline and cooperation. They must utilize the principles of group economics and group politics to improve the wealth base of black America. There must be an increase in the number and size of successful black-owned businesses and industries. Five, currently, white businesses have a lock on natural resources throughout the world. It is important, therefore, that blacks pursue mutually supportive business ventures with blacks of other nations, especially resource-rich Africa, which represents the best source for black Americans to secure raw materials for vertical industrial development. A vertical black business structure, see Chapter 9, would include a network of linked businesses from retail and manufacturing to the control of the resources. With the cooperation of government, blacks and black African nations could develop vertical industries. African nations have access to natural resources, but but lack the professional middle class and surplus disposable capital needed to capitalize on natural resources. Black Americans have the disposable income and the professional middle class, but lack the natural resources. Compared to Asian, Hispanic, six. Compared to Asian, Hispanic, and white communities, black communities appear to be the only ones that are unregulated and uncontrolled by its own residents. For example, white communities have councils and boards that establish and enforce community construction and business standards. In Japan, most communities vote on whether or not to accept foreign businesses into their communities. In the various ethnic communities in America, cultural barriers often establish standards and restrict business opportunities. In 1992, Cubans in Miami, Florida, publicly told Arab merchants that they could not establish businesses in the Cuban communities of Little Havana and Hialeah. The urban merchants experienced no such difficulties in opening stores in a black community in Coconut Grove. 7. The civil rights movement succeeded in giving blacks a boost in togetherness and increasing their access to white power. But the movement produced horrific and unanticipated negative results as well. The integration process sapped the financial, intellectual, and political cohesiveness of black communities and organizations. The remaining black institutions, families, churches, businesses have grown progressively weaker. The integration process tore apart previously united communities. As the more successful and affluent blacks moved to the suburbs, the neighborhoods they left behind became more dysfunctional, disorganized, and leaderless. Racial integration is the enemy of unity because it requires the integrating because it racial integration is the enemy of unity because it requires the integrating group to be subsumed, weakened, and scattered in a minority in a society in which the majority rules. Racial integration is the enemy of unity because it requires the integrating group to be subsumed, weakened, and scattered as a majority in a society as a minority in a society which the majority rules. Racial integration is the enemy of unity because it requires the integrating group to be subsumed, weakened, and scattered as a minority in a society in which the majority rules. Mobility patterns strongly suggest that blacks are the only non-white ethnic group that aspires to integrate with the white society. The second generation of European ethnics, Hispanics, and Asians have the option of assimilating, not integrating. Such studies demonstrate that white flight from neighborhoods and schools begins when the percentage of blacks exceed 5 to 8% of the population in those areas. And the maximum, if the maximum percentage of blacks that whites will voluntarily accept is 5 to 8%, what happens to the balance of the black population that cannot integrate? Or, on the other side of the question, what is the impact of the integration process on the social and psychological well-being of the 5 to 8% of blacks who successfully integrate into the dominant white society? When they abandon the larger black community to live as a fragmented, powerless minority in the dominant society, has a form of social political suicide been committed? Recommendations. 1. To achieve self-sufficiency, blacks must master the principles of capitalism and group economics. The window of opportunity for achieving this goal will pass within the next decade. Civil rights, social rights, and integration cannot produce group wealth and power. 2. Vertical integration of industries and businesses is a design that has the potential to create numerous individual but linked businesses, and therefore should become the basis for an economic development strategy for blacks. Vertically integrated businesses should be constructed around consumer products that blacks buy in a disproportionate number, or in areas where blacks are disproportionately represented in the production of the product. For example, blacks are high consumers of seafood, compact discs, tapes, and records, electronic equipment, expensive athletic wear, leather goods, distilled liquors, and movies. They are disproportionately represented in musical entertainment, education, and professional sports. All of these areas could represent opportunities for vertical businesses, structures for black business structures. In a vertically integrated business structure, blacks would control the businesses required on each level of the overall business structure, from manufacturing to retailing. Vertical integration provides business opportunities for warehousers, wholesalers, shippers, distributorships, truckers, dealers, insurance carriers, and other supportive businesses. The interrelatedness or vertical connection of the businesses establishes a network that protects the business from competitors while guaranteeing an economically empowering flow of wealth via the services and products. Although the size of the black consumer market is limited, that is not necessarily an insurmountable barrier to building businesses. Markets can be expanded to achieve economies of scale by exporting products from black communities to surrounding communities. With a strong sense of national community, a product produced in one black community could be competitively produced for domestic or markets in black foreign nations. Vertical business, four, vertical business within black communities could reduce high underemployment and unemployment rates by hiring black people. Could reduce high underemployment and unemployment. Vertical business within black communities could reduce high underemployment and unemployment rates by hiring black people, enhancing their community's tax base, and increasing their group's wealth and disposable income. As previously discussed, there is enough capital within the black community to support businesses. In addition, black businesses would not have to market themselves to blacks only. They simply need to have a solid base of black customers, just as all other ethnic racial groups provide solid and dependable customer bases for their industries. Okay. 5. Black leadership must find opportunities for black businesses to gain access to raw materials. If the concept of vertical integration is to if the concept of vertical integration is to be viable, black leadership must find opportunities for black businesses to gain access to raw materials. If the concept of vertical integration is to be viable, since established white industries have controls on most natural resources and raw materials, blacks should focus their energies on black African or third world nations. Africa represents both another market for expansion and a new source of natural resources that could fuel black business in America. Blacks should seek business relationships with various independent African countries, primarily in terms of securing competitive control of resources for new vertically integrated industries. Blacks could then start businesses based upon new valuable resources such as hardwood from Cameroon for a vertical chain of wood milling and furniture manufacturing, rubber for an automobile tire company, or diamonds and gold for jewelry and industrial use. 6. Black municipal governments should establish a trade policy between black communities and white suburbs. It is not fair. It is not a fair trade for white suburbs to simply ship products into black communities but never purchase products produced within those black communities. Fair trade policies and practices with white suburbs should go hand in hand with establishing vertical businesses and industries. A trade policy will become more important as a number of industries within the inner city